here I'm beginning to work on the background again. After the first block in, the first objective I've got here is to just sort of clean up some of the edges a bit, just to try to tidy up the face and the shape of the body a bit. I'm using a few differences in the palette this time. I've added cadmium lemon yellow and titanium white and caput mortem. That mixture you see there's a black, it's actually a mixture with some of the caput mortem and a blue, cobalt blue. I wanted to produce a sort of a more colourful black. Masking is pretty good in egg tempera because although the really watery egg tempera can run underneath a bit if you're not careful, it dries very quickly, and so you can reuse tape, move the tapes around, and you get instantaneous results. It's just checking for the tape if there's any paint on the back there. You can reuse the tape. Just scrubbing, scumbling in a way, paint in. You can use the egg tempera fairly watery. If you want sort of accuracy, you need to keep the brush more like a dry brush technique. But accuracy is not an issue in these areas. Now that's a mixture with the cadmium yellow and a bit of titanium white to just give it a bit more opacity. I wanted to brighten up the yellow in the background there. So I'm just basically glazing it. Egg tempera is fantastic for glazing. Cadmium yellow is not the best glazing colour simply because it's a bit opaque, but I wanted in this case to sort of blot out the background a little bit. Not strongly, but just enough to smooth it out a little bit more. I guess I'm in two minds there whether to almost take it almost completely out and smooth it off altogether, which is actually a little bit hard to do in egg tempera really, because it dries so quick. You get streaks and a lot of brush marks. Here I put back the yellow ochre halo that was around there because it sort of gave me a bit of a reminder of an icon or something. I like icons. I do a bit of icon painting just for fun. Egg tempera, especially even modern egg tempera, is very strongly influenced by icon painting to the extent that it sort of becomes a little bit wooden at times and a bit too precise. It's important that we think of it more in a more contemporary way and sort of in more of the spontaneous way we like to paint, I think, often in our world. Having said that, if you really like realism, it's an excellent medium for hyper-realism, super-realism if you want. It's especially good on figures. Like the colouring you get in the multiple layers that form in the face are just so realistic really. It may not show up on this video. The videos tend to distort the colours and the textures quite a bit. But especially the translucency of the layers is very reminiscent of the way skin reflects light. And so you can put blue layers, orange layers, all sorts of layers, one on top of the other. And it still retains that feeling of depth. In fact, increasing depth, you get the sense of that there's a light penetrating skin. There's some brushes I was going to use the next stage, just small synthetics. There's another brush coming up, I hope. Yeah, just larger. I do have a very worn version of a flat like that with this, the brush tips all spread out, and that's quite good for doing rapid line application or hatching application. There you can sort of see how dilute these levels are, especially now because I'm going to be glazing on the face here. With a blue, I'm just taking off some of the excess water. We want to make it fairly dry as we put it on, like dry brushing. We don't want to rush it. It's very easy to rush in egg tempera, and it doesn't make any difference really. It goes quite quickly without it. If you have some idea about warmth and coolness, it's often quite good to sort of interlayer warm and cool layers like this. So I'm doing a blue layer. Maybe later on I might come back if I get around to it with a warmer, yellowish layer or orangey layer on top. Not only does that sort of give some of the impression of sort of skin and blood and all sorts of stuff within the skin, but you get these beautiful chromatic greys in the glazing. In some ways, it's quite unusual to do this glazing to this extent. It's quite, I'm not actually sure why, because it's a very suitable method for using egg tempera. It's one of the things that it actually excels in, but people tend to use it more as a gouache technique. And I suppose in a previous video I've done with the landscape painting, from beginning to end, I use a more gouache-like technique most of the time. Here I'm just adjusting the drawing a bit, actually. Just going back and redrawing. Just wanted to get some emphasis into that forehead. I like the actual pencil drawing I did, especially in that area. Just bring this blue glaze in here and there. It's sort of in a way you can't go wrong, because you can always back out and change things. If it's serious, you can sort of wet the area and lift it out. Especially if the paint underneath is not too fresh. But even so, you can sort of glaze over it with some other colour which is a different warmth or opacity, and just remove any effects. Sometimes an area gets wooden, dense with paint and looks a bit dull. That's not always a bad thing, but you can often revive it with a glaze of colour. It's just a warm colour over, or a cool, clear, pure colour, and it just comes back to life. And you just can keep doing this and revising here. I'm just pushing at the shadows a bit more with these glazes. You can see I hardly use any paint. If you take up egg tempera painting, you'll find that your expenditure on paint is actually very small. I've got paints that I've had for 10 years. I just can't get through the pigments. I just hardly use them, especially strong pigments. So that area is a bit weak and a bit too flat. I just wanted to get a bit of texture in it. Using my fingers to actually push the texture a bit more. stippling. Using the white, this is actually titanium white. It's quite dilute. You can even see, even very dilute, it's sort of goes on very opaque, then dries semi-opaque. So it's a bit hard to judge. You just have to, that's why it's a good idea to put it on a bit more slowly at first. Just put on thin layers and build it up slowly. Because you don't want, especially with whites, you don't want them to build up and in a terribly chalky sort of way. And it's not a bad idea to sort of actually use whites directly, even though I know it's not advisable in something like oil painting to use direct whites, but because I can go back and reglaze on top of the white, I can actually revive highlights and then enhance the colour of them. It's a bit like a technique called mish technique that you might have seen in, if you look it up, M-I-S-C-H-E, just means mixed, and it's a sort of a mixed tempera, I think, and oil painting technique, which sort of uses whites to bring out highlights and then glazing to just increase the depth and saturation of everything. See, maybe I'm overdoing the sort of whites in the hair a bit there. But I can always pull it back if I feel like it. Main thing I'm interested in here now is pushing the colours a bit more in a more saturated way. Quite strange really. I started out very saturated with the underpainting and then went it dull a bit, and now I'm sort of pushing it back the other way. Yeah, very pale lemon yellow. Bit of a mess, that area under the chin. I hope you can slowly see how it sort of comes out. It just sort of starts pushing out. And this isn't, even though it's speeded up, it's still not very long. Not that long for me to do all this. As I said before, you see these colours, as they dry, they go a little bit sort of more transparent. Fixing up that edge again. Never happy with that edge. Improving the darkness along that edge. In some ways I'm not referring to the photo at all a lot of the time anymore. I'm just doing what looks right in the picture. I think that's important, at least for me it seems an important thing to do, is not to rely too much on the photo. As long as that the likeness or whatever you're trying to achieve is satisfactory, I think it's good to actually let it go and play with it a bit more, get some more out of it, some more personal stuff that you might be interested in. And here's a case where I applied this paint and then I thought, oh no, I forgot about doing the lines in the shirt. I wanted those white lines because they help define things a bit better. So while the paint's still pretty fresh, I'm just going to soak it with a bit of water. Just putting fresh water on it and then just lift it out. It comes out very easily. And now I'm taking a small piece of wax, paraffin wax, and I was just going to put those lines in. You can do all sorts of things, anything that you can do with watercolours, all sorts of little fancy tricks that you can get away with, maybe salt or sand and stuff like that you can do. Sponging. You probably use stuff like Glad wrap, like plastic film. Put it on a wet paint, lift it off, and you'll get all sorts of amazing effects. You have to be very quick though. Yeah, now I wanted to put the paint back on. And basically, having drawn those lines in with the paraffin, I can just sort of concentrate more on the tonality of the shirt to try to get more feeling and volume to it. Getting back into that glazing again. I want that chin to sort of stick out, and I'm still unhappy with that underneath the chin. That part of the neck is not sort of satisfactory at all. Just using some blacks and stuff to bring out some more emphasis. Redrawing this side of the forehead again. Yeah, just more emphasis. At this stage it is like drawing, I'm just coming back in and doing the emphasis again. You can sort of see how this can lead to a sort of hyper-realism if you want. You just can just keep coming and coming and coming until it looks like a photo, really. But, well, there's not much point doing that, really. Putting in some pure naphthol red there. Bringing it back in. Making it a bit more distressed. Putting it in there. Now I'm making an improvised mask with some paper toweling. I was using a spatter, picking up some paint of various colours, just spattering it on, some white in that case. I just want that more texture in there. Spraying it so I can soften and pull up the paint a little bit more. I mean, you could use more sort of sharp, hard-edged masking if you want, cut it out or something. I don't mind using paper or just bits of scraps of paper like this because it tends to produce sort of rough edges and soft edges, especially with spraying and spattering. If you had, for instance, a ball-like edged, sort of like a rounded edge, and you sprayed, the spatter will sort of go underneath the edge a little bit, so you get this very soft effects. So it's worth playing around with how to use masking. And do some interesting things. The roll is another good way of quickly getting in some textures. And that's it for now.